Hello and welcome to Frontline Conversations. My name is Bashir Abbas, and today I am joined by Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad. Ambassador Ahmed has had a distinguished career in the Indian Foreign Service. He has served as India's ambassador to the UAE, to Oman, and twice to Saudi Arabia. He has also served as Additional Secretary for International Cooperation in the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. Apart from his distinguished career in the IFS, Ambassador Ahmed has also kept quite busy writing books. He has written several, but his latest is actually a personal favorite of mine, which is West Asia at War: Repression, Resistance, and Grey Power Games, which was published in 2022. It's quite an exhaustive compendium, I would say, of the region's own evolution from the late 18th century to the modern era. The latter part of the book also focusing quite intensely on US interventions in the region, which is why I think there's few other people I would rather speak to today on recent developments in the Middle East. A quick crash course on context. I doubt there's anybody in the world today who isn't aware of how things have progressed, but nonetheless, the United States and Israel attacked Iran on February 28th. The war continued until it broke into a ceasefire across April 17th and April 18th. Since then, the world sort of settled into this moribund state of no war, no peace, but featuring intermittent attacks from all parties. Usually, the Americans attacking and the Iranians retaliating. Until, of course, we had a decisive MOU signed again on the 17th and 18th of this month in June, signed virtually by the Americans and the Iranians until they met physically in Switzerland just 1 day ago, while technical talks are continuing. While there are obviously several intricacies to discuss, even through all of these developments, especially with regard to the MOU itself and how both sides have sort of comprehended it and sort of voiced their own expectations from the other part. But with that, Ambassador Ahmed, it's a pleasure to have you here. With your permission, I'd like to get straight into the brass tacks and the first question. Do you have anything you wish to say at the outset, sir?
No, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, sir. As I said, it's best to get into the brass tacks. And when it comes to this region and recent developments, the brass tacks unarguably is Israel. It should be mentioned that the MOU was signed principally through Pakistani mediation, but between the Americans and the Iranians. And the Israelis haven't been featured anywhere, either in the process or in the MOU itself. And yet, it is visible to everybody that an inextricable part of the MOU is the future of Israeli actions in Lebanon, especially a requirement for Israel to cease all hostilities and to engage both the Lebanese as well as the Americans over their future concerns. Now, the Israelis, especially Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, as well as other officials, have made it largely clear that Israel doesn't feel bound by this agreement at all. But Ambassador Ahmed, with the board set as such, where on one hand you require Israeli commitment, despite them having not been in the room, at least physically, and on the other hand, you're Israel, which has sort of spared no words in their protests when it comes to the MOU. How would you say these two variables can be reconciled? Can they be reconciled?
For Israel, animosity towards Iran has been a central feature of their regional approach. For at least 35 to 40 years, Israeli leaders have been agitating that Iran poses an existential threat to Israel and that its leaders are wish to eradicate Israel from the face of the region. From the beginning of this century, Israel started focusing on the nuclear weapons program. It is possible that they had some preliminary weapons program in Tehran towards the end of the last century, but at least in this century, successive American administrations have found no evidence of a weapons program. However, for Israel, they have always found such evidence. They have appealed directly to American presidents and they have ensured that that is their animosity towards Iran. It's shared by the Americans as well. Due to Israeli efforts, the demonizing of Iran is now an integral part of the American political establishment. And therefore, not only is the American political establishment extremely pro Israel, at the same time, it is extremely hostile to Iran. This has been entirely manipulated by Israel. United States has attempted from time to time to engage with Israel politically and diplomatically. There have been occasions when Iran has made overtures to the American side, but systematically, on all occasions, Israeli interventions in Washington have ensured that these overtures have come to nothing. And therefore, the confrontation has always been the case. However, there's one point to be noted. The Israelis have constantly wanted United States to join it in directly and militarily attacking Iran. That the American presidents were not willing to buy. Successively, Clinton, George Bush Jr., Obama, Biden, all of them turned this overture down on the ground that there is no evidence that Iran had a weapons program. And they were also concerned that an attack upon Iran would lead to a regional conflagration and long term instability. Donald Trump is the first president to have been gullible enough to have walked into the Israeli trap. But now that the war has not gone as per the promises that Netanyahu had made to Trump, where he had spoken of a walkover, regime change, and the greatness of Donald Trump on the world stage, there is a very unforgiving leadership in Washington. They don't wish to involve Israel in any of the deliberations that are now being conducted with Iran. As far as Israel is concerned, the Americans have removed it from a major role in what is being discussed today, and the Americans have seized the opportunity for a direct engagement with the Iranians on crucial issues that have divided them. For the first time in several years, you are seeing an American president that is willing to constructively engage with Iran without the intrusion and influence of the Israeli side. So, yes, Israel has every reason to be deeply concerned about what is happening, but so far as I can see, the Americans are not willing to accommodate Israel at this point.
Right, sir. So then that naturally begs the question, and it also sort of allows me to lean into the Lebanon question, which is the fact that, as you said, that after several years, we are in a predicament where the Americans are keeping the Israelis out deliberately. And that can be substantiated by the US Vice President's recent comments made in public and on the record, where he says that, well, essentially what he says is that Israel's problems are not American, and that not every issue is a Jewish issue. He sort of makes it very clear that this White House is no longer willing to be led by Bibi Netanyahu's words. So then, naturally, the question is, how long do you think this sort of an arrangement between Americans and the Israelis, this sudden loss of good faith, if I can call it that, how long do you think that can last? And sir, before you answer that, I also would like you to keep in mind the Iranian side, because the Iranians have also been very consistent on Lebanon. And yet, sir, on the evening before the MOU was signed, we also saw something rather unprecedented, where the Israelis very deliberately bombed Beirut. They unleashed hell on Dahia again, as they have done for several times since 1982. And yet, once the Iranians had committed to retaliation, they held back because of the Americans conceding to the Iranians that we will remove the naval blockade instantly. And then the Iranians sort of held back, in terms of attacking Israel again. So the Iranians showed that if the Americans can concede, maybe the Lebanon front can be diluted a little. So, sir, my question ultimately then to you becomes that how will the American view and how will the Iranian view evolve when it comes to Israel and Lebanon?
From the Iranian perspective, I should point out they are an extremely sophisticated people. and have a very deep understanding of world affairs. They are strategic thinkers in the best sense of the word. They fully understand the mischief that Israel is up to. But their approach is very clear and very simple, that it is for the United States to manage the challenges posed by Israel. Up to now, whatever has happened in the region, the mischievous instigator has been Israel. And the instigation has taken place in the United States through their various lobbies, through their penetration of the political establishment, the media establishment, the academic establishment, the Christian evangelist groups, various Jewish groups, etc. Iran feels no responsibility whatsoever to engage with Israel directly. They don't recognize Israel. They recognize the mischief that Israel is capable of. But this war would not have occurred. And indeed, all the demonizing that Iran has suffered, and all the sanctions that Iran has suffered, it is entirely on account of the political influence that Israel has wielded in Washington, D.C. Therefore, if the United States has taken the considered view that in their future engagement with Iran, Israel will not be a party, they're ensuring that this goes through and remains American policy is the responsibility of the United States, not of Iran. As far as Iran is concerned, they are engaging with the Americans. The Americans are the principal role player in this scenario. They are the ones who have mobilized the maximum in terms of their forces. Israel has been using the Americans, but Israel can be put in its place if the Americans so wish. This is the perception from Tehran, and this is the basis on which they are going forward.
Right. But sir, again, do you think that is sustainable? How long do you think this window will last? Because as you said, Israeli influence on American decision making is decades long.
You are looking at a scenario
Do you
which we
expect this
are.
to sustain?
You're looking at a scenario which we have not, which has happened from time to time. There have been several occasions when American presidents have been completely fed up with Israel. But these same American presidents have never had the courage to publicly castigate Israel. And Israel has constantly ensured that regardless of the views of the American president, if the Israeli interest was in the picture, they had the capacity of appealing directly to the US Congress, to the US Senate, and through the various lobbies, wield influence upon different groups. Recall here that when Obama concluded the nuclear agreement, the JCPOA, Netanyahu was able to ensure that he got an invitation to the House of Representatives and spoke from the podium of the House against the American president. And the American president could not do anything. And 1 year later, a humiliated Obama was compelled to sign the America's biggest defense agreement with Israel, providing them with weaponry and support to the extent of $40 billion. In the case of Biden, also you saw that you have the American president was repeatedly insulted and humiliated in public. And once again, Netanyahu was able to address the House despite the views of the American president, and a very pathetic Biden finally exited the White House without being able to control and manage Netanyahu. What is different this time? And I would say to you, what is different this time is Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been an enigma. Very few of us have fully understood him. Very few of us understand the dynamics. Most of us have a very negative view of the persona of this gentleman. He is known to be an absolute extreme megalomaniac. He is supposed to have no gravitas. He is supposed to have no intellectual depth. He is it is believed that he has not even basic understanding of many of the complex issues that are being agitated today at world fora. What Netanyahu therefore found it very easy to do was to press the right buttons of this egoistical individual and promise him a walkover. He said within a few days, I will kill all the top leadership on day one. Within a few days, you will have regime change. You will have a new regime that is on its knees in front of you. You will then be able to dictate terms. You will be able to do what no American president has done since 1979. You will become the greatest president that the Americans have had, and you will be greater than Abraham Lincoln. This was the way in which Netanyahu pressed all the right buttons as far as Donald Trump is concerned. Now, this is a very strange bargain. You can get Trump on board by pressing these buttons, but the burden upon you is to deliver. Netanyahu had to deliver. He had to deliver to the American president what he had said in terms of his allure, and he was not able to deliver. There was, of course, the damage on Iran was inflicted, but there was no regime change. More seriously, Iran gave an outstanding account of itself militarily. It gave a great account of itself strategically by closing the Hormuz. It attacked Israel. It attacked American targets very robustly. And despite 2.5 months having passed since the conflict began, 70 to 80% of its fighting capability is still intact. Donald Trump realized he had walked into a trap. And there is no uglier person, no vengeful person more than Donald Trump when he has been thwarted. The man who thought he was going to strut on the world stage today finds himself looking like an idiot on the world stage. He has caused severe damage to his own standing at home. He has wrecked the American economy. He has alienated large sections of ordinary people in the United States. They can't bear the energy prices that have gone up. He found that the Hormuz was closed. No American planner had thought about the Hormuz at all and warned the president that you could have a problem on your hand. I have a feeling that for the first time in recent American history, you have a genuine rift between the American president and the Israeli prime minister on the basis that the Israeli prime minister made extravagant promises to the president, however gullible he might have been. But do recall he is vengeful. He is totally unforgiving. Remember that in the context of Op Sindoor, he has been very unforgiving as far as India is concerned because he believes that we did not give him the due respect and due credit for ending the war with Pakistan, and as a result, he lost the Nobel Peace Prize. He has been similarly insulting to the Italian Prime Minister because she had dared to criticize him when he had abused the Pope. And she had spoken up, and he insulted her recently. That has given me a certain perspective relating to the American president, and that is he's an extremely vengeful person, and therefore this divide that is going on now between Israel and the United States is actually likely
Like
to be
to
of
sustain.
long-term basis, and this is the basis on which Israel's views are not being respected in Washington. The American vice president spoke in public and said certain things which no American leader has done in the last 40 years.
Right. So this question of regime change, I mean, it appears that Donald Trump, in his own enigmatic way, to use your words, has also managed to recharacterize it. It almost appears that this is happening in his own mind. That he keeps calling the current Iranian government the third regime. Nobody's really asked him what he means because he ever so often issues several statements which people sort of struggle to draw any reasonable meaning from. But nonetheless, he keeps calling this a new regime. He keeps saying that these guys are more sane. With that in mind, it is also true that, well, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed on February 28th. There is a new supreme leader who we have not seen. not seen in public so far. And you have a new set of leaders, especially led by Mohammad Bakr Ghalibaf, who is more in front of the cameras, say, who has been more in front of the cameras in these last 2 months than he has been in the last several decades in Iran, compared to the Larijanis or the Pezeshkians or the Ahmadinejad. So it is clear, sir, that a new set of people are running the Iranian government. It is also clear that traditional institutions such as the parliament are being slowly sidelined, if you were to believe statements such as those by Mr. Nawabian, who has been complaining on IRIB day in and day out. Nonetheless, sir, nobody calls this regime change except for Donald Trump. But, sir, the reason I'm bringing this up is for a functional element, which is also something that you touched on, which is the Strait of Hormuz, that the Iranians have found real leverage. But, sir, this new Iranian leadership, how do you think they're looking to approach their long-term investment in this MOU and in this old investment of not pursuing nuclear weapons, which is a diktat that Ali Khamenei issued right after the US invasion of Iraq began in 2003? How much do you think this new Iranian leadership is likely to say that our leverage over Hormuz is sufficient and hence we need to
As far
continue
as
on this
the new
path of
leadership,
non-nuclear weaponization?
as far as the new leadership is concerned, it does not as yet have either a record or a public figure, just yet. They are in a war scenario, a conflictual scenario. They tried and tested leaders have been killed in large numbers, particularly on day one itself. Iran has always had a very complex and possibly opaque political order, at least an order which outsiders have never been able to fully understand. It is not more complex than the American system, but because Western people have not bothered to understand the dynamics of the Iranian order, they somehow use simple words like liberal and hardliner and believe that explains everything.
Hmm,
Iran is the Iranian
hmm,
leadership and the political order is a product of two forces, revolution and Islam. And their searing experience during the Iran Iraq war. Their political system is divided into two parts. There is the system of the supreme leader and the institutions that support him. He is the guardian of the country, and he is the guardian of the revolution, and he is the guardian of the Islamic Republic. And he has institutions that support him. On alongside within the constitution, you have a normal political system made up of the president and an elected majlis and all the instruments, all the institutions that go along with a normal political system. There is a very complex relationship between these two parts, which are well understood by the powers that be. At the end of the day, the supreme leader calls the shots. He is the final decision maker as far as the security of Iran is concerned. But he has input from some of the best minds that you have in Iran. And as I must emphasize to you, Iranian top leadership is extremely well educated, very thoughtful, very learned in history, politics, civilization. They have understanding of Western civilization. Many of them speak foreign languages. So they are very well equipped to handle the challenges that their country faces. Do remember, from they have been subject to sanction and supreme Western hostility right from 1979. They have not had one moment where they have not been abused by Western powers, and they have been subjected to sanctions continuously during this period. What is likely to happen now? We will see the emergence of the consolidation of the old order under the supreme leader, and you will have a reformist and liberal presidency under Pezeshkian. Pezeshkian, do recall that when he won the presidency, he was a reformer. And one of his first acts was to reach out to the West. And indeed, I had analyzed at that time that the Israelis will make every effort to undermine him so that he does not have the direct contact with the American that he had attempted. You remember one of his earlier statements was Iran is not the enemy of the United States. the Supreme, all of them, many times people in the West forget that Iran, of course, is conscious of its civilization, it is conscious of its Islamic heritage, it is conscious of its revolutionary experience. But at the end of the day, it is also a pragmatic republic. Their leaders constantly take decisions away from Islam, away from revolution, if it serves the national interest. And this is started with Ayatollah Khomeini himself when he drank the poison chalice and agreed to a truce with Iraq, which he had sworn he would not do. And similarly, the JCPOA itself is a great example of Iranian pragmatism. And if I had more time, I would elaborate to you all the various ways in which the Iranians had reached out to the Americans in the past and wanted to have a normal relationship. I would like to believe that the searing experience of this conflict and the damage that has been inflicted upon Iran, the economic damage which has been inflicted over a longer term period by the sanctions, it will encourage the pragmatic element in the Iranian leadership. I personally believe that while they may use the rhetoric of revolution, their approach will be pragmatic. How they manage their internal relationships, we have to see. Ayatollah Mushtaba is not yet known to us. We don't know what his views are. He has made one thing very clear, and I found it extremely interesting. When the MOU was presented to him for his approval, he has said in public, in a public statement, that my initial reaction was not positive, exactly like what his father had said in the context of the JCPO negotiation. But he said, because of the persuasion of the president, he mentioned the president, because of the persuasion of the president and the fact that he leads the National Security Council, I have agreed to it. Now, you can read many meanings here that he is on board, he's supporting the process, but the process is subject to proper realization. The Iranians will make their best effort to ensure that, like the JCPOA, this agreement is also successful. I personally feel that the Iranian side, all factions that are within the Iranian political order, whether it is the supreme leader or the people immediately around him in the Security Council or the top leadership of the IRGC and the armed forces and the political leadership that is elected, I think they will make a major effort not to lose this opportunity for a positive and constructive engagement with the Americans, taking advantage of the fact that the Americans are today truly cheesed off with the Israelis. And do recall here, this is not Trump's first term, it is Trump's second term. His entire focus is on legacy. And if he is able to have a successful engagement with the Iranians, and if the and it is, there is also a burden on the Iranians to ensure success, I think that the conditions for a positive outlook are far greater than those of a negative outcome.
Thank you, sir. Now that I've gotten you to comprehensively address three principal actors, which is the Israelis, the Americans, and the Iranians, we can now finally turn our attention to the MOU itself. I obviously will not go through the entire 14 clauses of the MOU, which is readily available in the public domain for our viewers and listeners. I would like to jump straight in and ask you, sir, that on one hand, we see that the MOU is indeed generating some good faith. I'm sure you would have seen that last night the US Treasury issued General License X, which allows the Iranians to access dollar-based trade again and to sell their oil, more simply put. Now, American sanctions on Iran are very layered, so it appears that the general reception of this license from the US Treasury has been positive. But, sir, the question of good faith aside, when you look at the MOU itself, what is it that really stands out to you from those 14 clauses? Which are the main variables that you are going to be watching? More specifically, sir, if I can be a little mischievous, to sort of ask you what you think will not work in the 60-day period and after it as well. So I'm leaving it rather broad. Uh,
I
Over to you, please.
found the first paragraph extraordinary because it not only speaks of a cessation of hostilities, but it also adds the two countries will refrain from the threat of use of force against each other, ensuring the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon. The final deal will confirm the permanent termination of war on all fronts, including in Lebanon and other provinces. Permanent. They are looking at a scenario of long term peace as far as Iran and the United States is concerned, and placing on the United States the burden and responsibility of managing Israel. Israel, I may say to you, and Vice President Vance reminded Israel, if they forgot, that there is only one supporter that Israel has in the world, and that is the United States. The weaponry used by Israel, two-thirds of which came from the United States, paid for by the American taxpayer. A very robust reminder to the Israeli population and to the Israeli leadership that you can whatever you are worth, and whatever aggressiveness you have shown over the last several years, and all the things that you have done vis-a-vis the Palestinians and the other countries in West Asia, it has been entirely possible only because of the support you enjoyed from the United States. So I would say to you, this is the most extraordinary intervention. It is a bilateral document approved at the highest level in both countries. The supreme leader approved it. The president has signed it. A very egoistical US president, chastened by the experience of war, he signed it publicly at Versailles. I would imagine that that is the most important commitment of the United States. The vision of the two countries that we will have permanent peace. Can you imagine this scenario? All your life, as a young person, you have experienced that West Asia has been convulsed in war. Imagine this vision. For the first time, it has come out publicly and signed at the highest level. The rest that you read are matters of detail. Certain elements, you could call them acts of goodwill from the American side. There is everything that Donald Trump had introduced in terms of restrictions on the sale of oil and the sanctions connected with that, restrictions on finance, etc. That has been reversed in the first instance. I think that is a very great boon for the Iranians, that once again, this country, which has the second or third largest oil reserves in the world, is able to enter the global market. It has the second or third largest reserves of gas, which it has not been able to develop or monetize. There have been restrictions on financial transactions. It is now going to come out from that. So I think that is a very major act of goodwill on the part of the American side vis-a-vis the Iranians, and has given them immediate relief. The Hormuz has opened, again a very important development, but the Hormuz, the reality of this choke point has changed. Earlier, we took it for granted that there was free passage in the Hormuz. There is now an authority that has emerged. And the Americans have accepted this change by referring to the concept of maritime services in the agreement. So I would say that there are certain things that have the act of goodwill from the American side, and which has shocked the Israelis and those who support them, because the large sections of Americans are used to abusing Iran. There is no crime that the Iranian would not do. Look at the depiction of Iran in some of their films. It's obnoxious. None of them has ever been to Iran. None of them has engaged properly with their society and culture. And yet they have the temerity to show the people in an extremely poor light. Most people in the West don't even know the history of Iran and the contribution that Iran has made to world civilization. and yet they have been negative. So I would think that both from the Iranian side and the American side, there seems to be a very deep desire to take advantage of this opportunity. It needed a horrible war and the death of so many people, including the top leadership of Iran. But yet, they don't want to be photographed with the American delegation, but they are still sitting face to face with the American delegation and talking about matters that pertain to regional peace and security. So I think this is a very, very interesting and important development.
So, in what seems to be forever ago, when Donald Trump was running for his second term, he made it quite clear that he was not interested in forever wars. He was talking about a potential deal with Iran from the beginning. That was also the time when you had Iranian leaders, including President Pezeshkian, who you will remember was authoring articles about how Iran was open to business with the Americans. We even had figures like Ali Shamkhani say it on the public record that they're open to business with the Americans. So we know that Donald Trump came into this presidency with a certain worldview, and then, as you said, we went through this unfortunate war. But that brings me to two omissions in the MOU, which of course were deliberate and I feel are largely positive. The first is the question of Iran retaining its right to nuclear enrichment under 3.67%. Now, we've had in these last 2 days both President Trump and Vice President Vance sort of imply that why shouldn't the Iranians have the right to enrich for medical and scientific purposes? And the question of ballistic missiles. Again, the US president said their neighbors have it, so why shouldn't the Iranians? Now, sir, obviously, one can't help but remember the time in 2018 when the US president unilaterally withdrew from the JCPOA. He made the question of ballistic missiles quite a big deal. To us, sir, or to me at least, now it proves that there was no inherent US interest in limiting the Iranian missile program, unless they learned some grave lessons from this war. But, sir, given these two variables, do you think that these might change in the future? Do you think in the future there might be a pressure to bring ballistic missiles into the agreement or to remove Iranian enrichment rights completely? The latter perhaps is not so tenable, but certainly the question is, what do you think?
The missiles issue is not on the table at all. It is not mentioned in the MOU. Vice President Vance has said, how can we tell any country to get rid of weapons that are for defensive purposes? So, as you know, the entire story relating to Iran has been written by, pursued by, and peddled by Israel. They were constantly upping the ante. First, they talked of the weapons program, then they brought in missiles, then they brought in regional security, they said support for terrorism in the region, etc. They were constantly bringing in new issues in order to ensure that the anti Iran pot, would be kept boiling. I think the
Point.
Americans have cut through that crap. They have now cut through that, focused on the issue. The core issue is the nuclear issue. Nuclear issue was fully addressed in the JCPOA. So it is not as if you are starting with a clean slate. 2 years of negotiation had taken place. Who is the one who encouraged the Americans to withdraw from the JCPOA? Netanyahu. He has taken credit publicly. He is the one who influenced the American president in his first term to withdraw. He is the one who encouraged the American president to kill Qasem Soleimani in order to ensure that the animosity would continue. He is the one who ensured that the first Gaza agreement of January last year became null and void, and and he violated it immediately. He is the one who has ensured that the second agreement has been a non-starter. Nothing is happening over there, and he is the one who ensured that the American president got into this absolutely useless war. So the Israelis have constantly been a very powerful influence. They are the ones who were able to ensure that Trump in the first term recognized Jerusalem. They were able to ensure that they could integrate the Golan Heights and East Jerusalem into East Jerusalem as their capital. They have been threatening to integrate the occupied territories, but may not do so just yet. Many of the things, in fact, I would say almost all of them, that have gone wrong between the United States and Israel, there is an evil genius behind the scenes. And that I have referred to him in an interview that in this narrative, he is the Iago, the
Mhm.
absolute unalloyed evil who creates discord between people and then stands on the sideline to obtain the benefits from the discord he has sowed and from the violence that he has encouraged.
Right, sir. So, if I have understood you correctly with regard to this MOU, there are two things which stand out. The first is that this broad commitment by the Americans to genuinely and sincerely seek regional peace in the Middle East is what is most important. All of the other nuts and bolts will fall in place as long as this commitment is up. The second element being that the only principal threat to the Americans potentially not staying committed is Israel. But presently, it appears that between the Americans and the Israelis, there has been a lot of love lost. And if Israel continues to be disabled, so to speak, from interfering in these positive developments, we are likely to remain on a positive footing. Uh, with that being said, sir, I would naturally turn your attention to the last element, which is the question of the future. And when I say the future, sir, I don't mean only this MOU or the 60-day period, but the future of the region as a whole. Because, sir, to us, it has appeared almost as if since October 2023, developments have been practically daily. But now it appears that there might be a new sense of calm. And so I know that in your book, towards the latter end, you sort of address this as the West Asian malaise. And you sort of outline three factors. The first is persistent state weakness amongst most regional states. The second is the absence of a region wide, consensually accepted regional security arrangement. And the third is the robust activism of external powers, which is the Americans. To me, sir, it appears that in these last 3 years, all of these three variables have shifted in some ways or the other. But in within that context, how would you say, what do you think the future of this region looks like? Especially these three variables that you had outlined in 2022, because it appears that a lot has changed, to put in mildly.
West Asia has not been stable for several decades, overwhelmingly due to external interventions. The external interventions were overwhelmingly influenced by the availability of oil and then gas. This region has the largest reserves of oil and gas. The strategic value of oil and gas has not diminished. As you know, while there is a green transition, the pace of transition is very, very slow and extremely expensive. My own understanding is for a large part of this century, the world will continue to depend on fossil fuels. And the importance of West Asia for global well being, the global economy, the global stability, and the economic prosperity of the world as a whole. The countries of Asia are the principal buyers of this energy. Now, the outlook is very uncertain in every respect because we are still within the throes of conflict. That while there are discussions taking place, the issue relating to Palestine, as exemplified by the situation in the West Bank and Gaza, is totally unresolved. The issues relating to Lebanon is still unresolved. The Israel demonizing of Iran and bringing the United States on board, while it has taken a big hit, it is still work in progress. We have some way to go over there. In this scenario, the outlook for the region is overwhelmingly unpredictable. It is not easy for any of us to say with authority that things will go in this direction or that direction. Let me share with you an observation that please remember that whatever happened subsequently, 7th October was a body blow for Israel. It was a very major defeat of a country that believed itself to be the regional hegemon. Their entire security apparatus and political structure failed on that one day. It will not be easy to recover. What have they done in retaliation? They have killed a very large number of women and children, very ordinary civilians. Israel has not faced a conventional war in 50 years. Its great strength of its armed forces is the mass murder of ordinary people. It does that in Lebanon, it does that in the Palestine, it has done that again in Iran. And it has taken a beating. But the government stands discredited. And I believe that is the occasion when certain major questions should be asked. The second point that I want to make is the onslaught that they carried out on Gaza. And yet, after all these months, the Israeli Prime Minister said he controls only 60% of Gaza. And he has given the mandate to his armed forces that you should control 70%. That means they have a very, very long way to go. Killing ordinary people who have no army, no navy, no air force, who have no weapons whatsoever, who don't even have a bread knife in their hand, to kill them with the help of the air force and the artillery and your tanks is not an act of bravery, it is an act of inhuman violence and abuse. Look at another scenario. Once you had the Board of Peace in place, you had the second Gaza truce. If Israel had asked itself that this is a time to stop, by the end November, December last year, Israel was on top. It was the unchallenged hegemon in the region. It had also attacked Doha in September, making it clear that all GCC countries were within their target and that they could take out any one of them anywhere. Then there was strategic overreach. The attack on Iran has brought this hegemon back into the debris and ashes. The kind of strut that you had in the terms of Netanyahu and the Israeli armed forces, today they have lost overnight everything because the power that they had attacked, believing it to be weak, that we have taken away their air defenses, etc., they have come back very badly chastened. I would like to say to you that this is a golden opportunity to think new thoughts. Israel should ask itself from 1948 till now, we have been constantly at war. We have been at war with our neighbors, but most often they have been at war with themselves. They've never given their people a more day's peace. Even on day one of the war, 7th October, 400 Israeli soldiers were killed. Since then, 800 more have been killed. Whom have they killed in return? Ordinary women and children. Their soldiers are already suffering from a traumatic disorder, post-conflict disorder. They will come back damaged. They will come home damaged, just like the American soldiers came back very severely damaged, physically and mentally, from Afghanistan and Iraq. This mindless mass murder of ordinary people damages you and makes you very, very weak as a people. So I would say to you something which is a food for thought, that Israel should ask itself, how many people we killed? We killed nearly 80,000 people in Palestine. We killed 1,000 more in the West Bank. We killed 4,000 people in Lebanon. We killed 7,000 in Iran. Do we have peace? Do we have security? Do we have a bright future? 800 soldiers died. Every day a few soldiers are being killed, by the way, in Lebanon. Today, as I speak to you. Is this what Israel wants to have? Therefore, I would say to you that the trauma of this experience, this horrible experience that the region has had, is also the moment where you can think new thoughts. Thoughts which you don't have the leisure and sitting in the comfortable drawing room. When you have experienced this searing conflict, people who observe you think about it, have a broad view of the region, broad view of history, we are able to ask ourselves that if the Old Testament says to us that the Arab and Jew have the same parent, the same father, Prophet Abraham, and that reconciliation between Arabs and Jews is called by the American president the Abraham Accord, does not this same tradition of Prophet Abraham encourage you to be together as you were for 4,000 years? The Arab and the Jew lived side by side in Palestine for 4,000 years. It's only the Zionist experience over the last so few decades that has divided them. So I'm saying, as a student of history, as a student of politics, as a student of war, I believe this is a golden opportunity. The Americans, in their own unique way, Donald Trump, because nobody has ever understood the dynamics of his mind, he has understood this, that there is not the confrontation with Iran is the most useless way for the Americans to spend their time when there are so many other major challenges that they have to face. So this element of goodwill. Now, will this be an easy ride? Certainly not, because you have 50 years of negative history to overcome. The greatest challenge that this agreement has, and indeed I would say the region, is not from history, not from
Mhm.
politics, not from conflict. It is from the persona of Donald Trump. I'm saying something quite banal, but this is the fact. We have concerns about Donald Trump's stamina, about his concentration, about his attention span, about his gullibility, the absence of gravitas, and therefore such a major responsibility has been handed over to the American president,
Mm.
who in the past has shown no capacity whatsoever for deep thinking and for going forward on issues that really require concentration over a period of time. So I would say to you that the greatest challenge we have is not from Israel or from the American political establishment, it is from the persona of Donald Trump. His persona has enabled him to approve the MOU and to direct his vice president to see it through. The vice president has a direct vested interest in its success because he is likely to be a major candidate for his party in about 2 years and odd, very soon. The election campaign will begin within a year or so. Therefore, he has a direct vested interest in the success of this. And the remarks that he makes are going to be quoted back to him during the election campaign. And therefore, whatever he says, he's saying with great thought and with great consideration, deep consideration. So I would think at the end, as I can say to you, this is a golden opportunity, the opportunity we have not had in several years to actually think new thoughts, think new arrangements, new alignments, new ways of going forward. And you could actually change. That was the first paragraph that I quoted to you. Permanent peace in the region will fundamentally redefine the complexion of the region and the future of the region as we know it.
Right, sir. You called it banal, but I think it's anything but banal because it is also evident that Trump's mercurial nature is taken very seriously by the Iranians. Because just yesterday they also implied that that very first clause that you read out, which also proscribes either side from not just attacking but making the threat to attack. The Iranians see Trump's rant from yesterday as a threat. But thankfully, that hasn't evidently crossed the threshold and broken down the MOU. The MOU still stands. One can only hope, sir, that this MOU can lead to a larger regional recharacterization, allowing everybody to think new thoughts, as you so very well reminded us. With that, Ambassador, thank you so much for your insights and your time. It is always a delight to listen to your thoughts on the region, especially so considering these developments as we continue to track them. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. I wish you all the best.